Okay, we are going to take a look at detail creation, management, organization concepts in this session. Um, First of all, there are many ways to manage and build out a set of details in ArchiCAD. This is going to illustrate one way. I'll try to hit on the advantages and the methodologies and the system and the concepts here. Using this method. I've often referred to this detail method as the sea of details method. If we look here in the project map, we'll just start here. Like if we're, for example, looking at door details. I've already placed a door detail worksheet here, or sorry, rather detail viewpoint. We're in the project map, so everything in the project map is referred to as a viewpoint. If we open this up, I refer to it as a sea of details because here within the project map we have potential to have any number of details, as many as we really need to build out the set. Generally, when I'm looking at the project map, I want detail viewpoints created for each type and scale of details. So here I have 6-inch details, for example, and I've set the project map to show 6-inch. It could be that I need 3-inch door details. Generally speaking, I want to create a new viewpoint for each scale and each type. So the reason for that, if we switch to 3-inch details here, you can see that my detail areas, these sort of detail templates, start to overlap. So in order to avoid annotation and stuff that laps over each other, complex layer management, and just kind of finicky view settings, I'll generally create a separate viewpoint for each scale and type. So here in the template, there's placeholders for assembly details, foundation details, etc. This is never intended to be everything that you're ever going to need for a project, obviously. So you're going to have to create and identify and create new detail viewpoints. To do that, we simply right-click on the detail set in the project map and say New Independent Detail. Here I'm going to call it, we'll say D-07. And the reference ID is really just there as an organizer. So that could be anything that makes sense. We could call it DR-DEET and call it 3-inch door details as an example. So here I'm going to set in the project map my 3-inch scale. I'm going to take this template object right here, and by the way, that lives under the object tool under your embedded library for general, is that detail template object. I'm going to copy this and place this into here. And now I know that this detail template has been sized to fit within the cell here of the master layout. So we've got an 8-inch by 7.5-inch detail cell for this layout, the door and window detail layout. And this object is actually sized to fit. So while the total size of this thing comes in at 2'8", the scale doesn't matter. The width and the height of those modules is going to be constant regardless of the scale. It's like a font size or a marker size. So here I know that if we come back into here, it's a 4x3 detail grid. So I'm just going to copy these around. We'll put 4 of them wide and 3 of them tall. So if I pull this down to here, there's all of my detail identifiers. And the great thing about this is that I can start to mock up and showcase what details I need in a project before I've even drawn anything. So for example, I could even just simply say, I know I'm going to use this to identify the details that I have in my model. So I've got door, or maybe we'll call this entry door head. I need to draw a detail for that. Let's make that 36-point font. And we'll just use a red font here. So entry door head, maybe we've got entry door strike. Threshold and hinge. So I don't even need to worry about what's on these details. I'm just using this to say, okay, well, these are the details I'm going to need for my door and window package. We'll get into exactly how those details are laid out here in a second. But I've identified here in the project map that I have 3-inch door details, and I've even started to figure out what those door details need to include. And obviously I could even say, like, here's a sheet of details, here's the next sheet of details, here's the next sheet of details, etc. So I can actually identify as many details as we need, but breaking this up by detail type reduces how many details are in one of these sort of sea of details. It also ensures that they're not overlapping because of varying scales. So it could be that maybe we have some foundation details or concrete details that are 3-inch, maybe most of them are 1-inch or even 3/4-inch details. So you have different detail scales and different detail types set up in the project map. Now I do want to be able to say that this is my door head detail and identify that this area right here, if I zoom in, is specifically for the door head detail, and so that when I open it up I don't just have to hunt around in maybe dozens if not hundreds of details to find this single head detail for the entry door. To do that, I'm going to come to the project map. I'm going to go ahead and purge this stuff out of here. Excuse me. So I've got exterior details here, similar to how we're going to build out the project map with all of our various identified detail types. We're going to do the same thing in the view map. We're going to create folders in here. So we've got door details. Maybe we'll create a new folder for window details. Maybe another folder for, not save view, sorry. A new folder for foundation details. So all of the detail types from the project map need a folder here. However, if we had, say, 6-inch door details and 3-inch door details, those could all be saved to the door detail folder. We don't have to identify 6-inch details and 3-inch details here in the view map. This is where we're going to see all of our door details in one place. To do that, just to illustrate here simply, I'm going to take this viewpoint. The viewpoint is the term used to describe the point of origin used to create views from the project map. So I'm going to save the viewpoint to the view map with specific view settings. Those view settings in the latest iteration, the template, should be pretty transparent as to what they should be. So if I just right click here and save current view, I want to make sure that I save it with a custom name. I don't want to use the default 3-inch door detail name because this isn't a 3-inch door detail anymore. It is an entry door head detail. The layer combination should match everything for that view. So A6 head details, A6 details, or sorry, not head details, A6 details, A6 details, A6 details. So all of the view settings for the details are going to use the A6 view settings, making sure that this is the 3-inch detail that I had. Another thing that's really critical for details in particular is to uncheck the ignore zoom and rotation. Make sure that this is not checked and I'm saving with the current zoom, not fit in window, not home zoom, but current zoom, so that when I open this detail, this entry door head detail, it's going to zoom to this specific viewpoint. I'll show you why that's critical here after we get a few of these saved. So here's my entry door head detail. I'm going to pan down to the strike jam detail. So we'll save this as entry door jam strike. All of the other view settings were retained from the last saved view, so I don't really have to fish around for those unless it's changed from one detail to another. Let's pan over to this detail and save this, and we'll call this entry door jam hinge, and we'll come down to the last detail and save current view, entry door threshold. Now you can be really systematic about this and sort of identify the details and then the detail types, and then go in and identify the details and then save them. Or we could get a few of these identified and then realize, oh yeah, I've got a transom detail that I need to save up here. So let's say transom head, transom mullion, and transom sill. So I've identified 3 new details, even though I had some already set up here. So maybe these get saved to the window details, or maybe they are part of a door transom, so I can then zoom in on this one and save that as transom head detail. So you can be really systematic, or you can kind of go back and forth. Obviously, you're not going to be able to identify all the details, but being able to sort of set this up before you've put pen to paper, so to say, we've basically just we're using this as an outline, a bullet point list of here's the details. Now, when I mentioned this ignore, zoom, and rotation being critical, here's why. When I click on entry door head, I want to know that that's the detail I'm working on. And I don't want to have to fish around for where that detail is in this whole mess of details. So clicking on the strike detail, I'm going to zoom to that, I'm going to zoom to that, I'm going to zoom to that. So we do have an idea of what all of these detail viewpoints are as we're creating them, and we can go back through and start drawing on them at any point. Now, the other great thing about this method is that you can really get far into identifying what these details are, figuring out how many sheets we're going to need, and even referencing the details within the plan set using detail markers and section markers and whatever other marker types we need to reference these details in the plan set before we've even drawn what those details are. And again, that's not necessarily the go-to workflow, it's just an option. You could certainly go through and start drawing these details out and then figure out how they go on a sheet, and really get into what the details are before you've even laid this out. There's a whole host of different workflows, but the concept is the same, is that we are setting up a viewpoint for each detail type and scale, saving those to the view map with specific view settings and zooms, making sure that we're not ignoring zoom and rotation. And then sort of step 3 in all of this is to place this to a layout. So if I go to my door and window detail sheet here, placing it to a layout, it's very simple, just drag and drop from the view map. So I open the layout, I find the detail I need. You can even search. I could say that I want the door details, and I can search by door and start dragging those over. So here I could start dragging those into place. And obviously there's going to be issues with the zoom and the scale, not the scale rather, but the zoom and everything of these details need to be refined a bit. So if I come into the detail frame here, and we'll go ahead and click there, and we'll snap it to, oops, I missed. Give me 1 second here, we'll figure this out. We'll snap to right there. How far do we have to go? 9/64ths. Okay, so we're getting this all dialed in. Don't worry about the detail template. That's something that's really just kind of temporary to get this onto the sheet. You'll have to excuse me if I don't quite understand the HP titles. Those are in the drawing settings. Command T or Control T gets you to the drawing titles here. I'm sure there's got to be something in here to adjust the width of this to fit multiple detail types. That might be something we have to troubleshoot later. But generally speaking, it's this drawing frame size to fit in that cell. And we can do that for each of these. So we can say that this drawing for the strike detail sits here. Oh, I missed. Wherever that needs to sit there, right? So there's that detail. So we can start laying all of this stuff out as we go, and then know that these are basically in a one-to-one relationship from the project map to the view map to the layout book. So I've got all of my details in here organized. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that one because we don't need to show every single instance. I've got my head detail and my door strike detail already placed. They're going to number by where they're at on the sheet. That's based on the master layout settings. So when I go into the settings of that layout, it's using the 3x4 grid. We have several master layouts for different grid scales, drawing scales, etc. And that's the grid as well as the title block. So what shows up in here, this is 3-inch details as the master layout, which is what these happen to be. We'd have to have another master layout for 6-inch details if we had a different scale. Because that is a fixed text there. Now we've got everything laid out on the sheet. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we are able to reference these details either in elevation, in section, in plan, in legends, wherever they need to show up. Schedules, we're going to reference, for example, detail 11, A602, as our door strike detail for the entry door. I'm going to come into the floor plan. If this is my entry door right here, I'm going to grab a detail marker, go to the settings of that marker, and here's where that viewpoint and view setting really become critical. If you remember, I mentioned that the viewpoint refers to the point of origin in the project map for that detail. We don't want to reference the selected viewpoint because there's dozens, potentially hundreds of details on that viewpoint, that point of origin. We could reference the drawing. However, if that drawing ever gets deleted, then our detail reference goes away. What we want to do is reference the first place drawing, the drawing being that viewport on the layout from the view map. So the first place drawing of a selected view, the view being the item saved to the view map. So we're referencing the view and the first placed instance that it shows up in the layout book as a drawing. So we're going to select that option. We're going to click Browse. And again, we have search functions in ArchiCAD. So we could say, I know that I need my entry strike detail. Let's go ahead and put this in. We can start with the favorites. I've already applied the favorite. It's this little star icon right here. You can apply that favorite. And you can see here that this is already referencing 11602 because I'm referencing where that view, that entry strike detail, is placed to the layout book. So let's go ahead and say OK here. And if I need a detail right here, I can draw that in. As another example, let's take a look at referencing the entry hinge detail. So we'll go ahead and select that and say OK and draw that detail. So you can see here that that detail references drawing ID, layout ID, but it doesn't actually give me any reference. I'm just fine tuning this to match the other detail. So this is not giving me any reference point for that detail because this entry hinge side detail has not been placed to a layout yet. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that gets affected here. So if we go back into the layout, and let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and drag in the hinge detail here. I can see that drawing frame right there. We'll go ahead and crop this back down to the right size. Drop that in right there. Let's fit that in. Okay, so now we've got our entry hinge detail. If we go back to our plan view, a shortcut is Control-Alt-Shift-R to rebuild the view, and then that should add that in. Otherwise, it will eventually kind of snap into referencing that detail. So the great thing about this method is that if I were to, for example, move this to a different sheet or even cut this off of the sheet, and if we look here, it's going to reference no ID. If it gets pasted back to, come back in here, to another sheet, it's going to re-reference that. If it shifts to, for example, a different cell on this sheet or even on a different sheet, it's going to reference that cell. So now it's 5602 versus 8602. So by placing the markers to reference the first placed instance of the selected view, the first place drawing of the selected view, I know that wherever that view gets placed, as long as it's placed, it's going to update. So if I see that one still says drawing ID, layout ID, let's go ahead and just show that here. I know that that's a detail that still needs to be placed. So if I come back into the settings, I can see, if I go browse, what that's supposed to be referencing. So I know that my entry door jam hinge side detail hasn't been placed to a layout yet because I see the drawing ID, layout ID. So it's a good checks and balance for making sure that all details drawn are sheeted if you go through this process of identifying the details, saving them to the view map, placing them to a layout, and then referencing the markers for everything on the layout from the view map. I know that everything's been placed once I don't see this drawing ID, layout ID anymore. Okay, so let's extend this into a few tips on actually drawing the details. So one thing that you can do is, let's go to our floor plan. We'll take a look at our first floor plan and right click and say show as trace reference. Here on my work environment, I have a trace reference palette. So if I zoom out, let's zoom extents, there's my floor plan right there. The trace reference palette allows me to grab the trace reference and move it up to here, for example. So I can see, let's get it a little bit tighter. I can see what that model content is that I need for this detail. And I know that I'm matching that content. The doors and the windows in ArchiCAD, and there just really are not any tools that give you options that provide more detail than just basic square stock kind of stuff. So you always end up drawing these things from scratch. There are some tools that can help. If we go to the object tool here, for example, and let's go to libraries loaded, and let's go to the object library 27, general, drawing symbols, detail library rather. There's like, for example, there's a wood frame object here. So if we have a 2x6 wall, we could set that here, single, double stud. We can set it to, oh, doesn't give us the option for double, but we can say that it's blocking, continuous, or finish. So if it's trim level elements, let's just, for example, say that we've got 1 inch by 3.5 inches, so 5/4 by 4 square stock trim on the inside of the wall. I can start blocking out and detailing my door excuse me, my door detail before I get anything as I sort of understand more detail and more information. Now, because I've set this to custom, I can stretch this to fit. Other things that you can use, for example, are fills, lines and fills. So if I set this to my building materials, I know that it's going to match my plans or my other building materials. So I could say I've got 5/8 inch gypboard here. We can use the ArchiCAD layer on the details because they really are just single-use viewpoints. And I can see whatever I'm drawing here, this is how it's going to fit in that detail cell. So I can come in here and say that we've got a fill that is 5/8 of an inch tall. Oh, let's adjust this. Give it a solid line. Let's make it thinner fill. A couple of other things. Let me double check. I think we've got a renovation override going on here. Well, that should be showing. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look here. So if we've got 5.5 inch door wall rather, so you can see here there's probably something off in my plan view. I'd probably have to adjust that. This could be plywood, and we could show that here. Oh, I see what's going on. These fills need a pen. There we go. So now we get those fills. We can set, we'll make this 2x6 and continuous. So I can get a lot of detail into this. Obviously, you don't need to watch me draft for an afternoon, but this is essentially one way to build those details out. Another method, if we come back into our plan view here, if I've modeled this at a high enough level of detail, let's come back into here and let's say that this is floor plans. That should give us more detail. There we go. So if I grab my wall and door here and copy that and paste that into here, and we'll just say center of current view. Right, so now I can grab this stuff, and using like the edit commands like split and things like that, I can trim this whole thing out to only include the pieces that I need relevant to that detail. So let's go ahead and do that here. Right, so there's my hinge side jamb detail. We'll pull that to right there so we're lining up. And we know that we're showing correctly here. And I might need to then come in and like eyedrop and inject or replace the fills that are in here to work appropriately. I'm guessing actually that my drywall is probably too thick on that one. Anyway, gets you the idea of how we can build these things out. And once we've kind of started to mock these out, we can get rid of those identifiers because now we have those details here. We turn off the trace reference, right? And it starts to look like a detail. So using lines, fills, objects, polylines, things like that, like it's pretty common to say that we want, let's say that we've got a 0.5 millimeter outline to this detail, right? So I can draw in and get that bold, punchy detail line here. We'll do a later session on creating custom objects because it's very likely that you'll have like manufactured profiles for a lot of these kind of door and window details. So we can show you in a later session on how to create custom objects for this, how to import manufacturer's profiles and details into your file. That's all very doable. ArchiCAD is very cross-platform friendly, so we can use manufacturer's details, not have to generate this stuff from scratch. But generally we're looking at lines and fills and objects to draw these details out. Now, because I've already identified these things ahead of time and I've placed them and I know that's where it's at, that detail's drawn. If I open that detail source view from the layout, it's another way to navigate, it's jumping straight to that zoom, because when I saved that detail, I saved it in a way where it was not going to ignore the zoom. It's jumping to the saved zoom for that detail. Yeah, and then it's just a matter of going through and we can always circulate back and say we've got these other details and start building it out. You know, it doesn't have to be always a one-way linear process. It can be some back and forth. You can even in the plan view, let's go to the strike detail and show as trace reference, right? So if the details inform the plan, I'll zoom extents, and again, using that trace reference function, if I've resolved some of the detail stuff, and I figured out that my detail needs to be different because of manufacturer's details, manufacturer's changes, then I can come back and change my model using the trace reference. I can figure out what needs to change in the model for this to match, right? So if it's thicker plywood, thinner plywood, different framing, different composite settings, I could see that there's a discrepancy here. So I've resolved how the assembly needs to work at the detail level. Now I need to go back through and adjust my model to work with that detail. So it is very much a circular process of outlining the details and going back and revisiting the model and redoing the details or updating the details to match the model. So there's a lot of ways that we can work together with this system. But the general concept, again, is build out, identify and build out the key detail viewpoints, save them as individual views to the view map, and place those individual views to a sheet. After that, we start placing and referencing markers to the view map. So we're referencing those detail views as they're saved to the view map in order to get the section elevations and schedules to show those detail references. So this has been a quick overview of how we'd like to see details managed and organized in ArchiCAD. I hope this helps.